Well, hello, welcome back. Welcome, Tony Bell. Are you ready to ring my bell today?
I'm ready to do this. It's another happy Friday on the nonprofit show with Julia C. Patrick. So I I I couldn't be any happier.
Well, I think you're going to ring my bell literally today because we're going to be talking about something that you know a lot about. I've seen this occur,
Mhm.
and I continue to see it occur, and I'm really flummoxed by the whole thing, and that's the CEO position and fundraising chaos. And I use that word chaos because I think there's a lot of chaos in this process, like the fundraising aspect, and then you throw the CEO in on it. Oi, it can be a little intense, right?
It can be, but I think only if people choose for it to be.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let's get to it. We never have chaos on the nonprofit show when we have our amazing presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Third Sector Company, Your Part-Time Controller, and us, Fundraisers Friday, where we are. Woohoo! I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Here today with Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy himself, the amazing Tony Bell, one of the great minds in the nonprofit sector and leadership, thought leadership. I don't just say that lightly. I mean, you really are an amazing thought leader. And we are thrilled that we were able to poach you for these Friday shows. So thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always an honor, and I don't know that I ever feel more relevant, Julia, than I do during the time that I spend on the nonprofit show. So thank you for that.
Oh my God, that's great. Well, that's great and it's sad at the same time because you are totally relevant. But I love that you said that. That just kills me. Okay, this is my question. I think you're gonna just like put my hair on fire. Is the CEO the primary fundraiser of a nonprofit?
I'm always really mindful of our audience,
Mm-hmm.
our viewers, and our listeners, and the different kind of stages that their organizations may be in. So I just kind of want to preface it that it really depends on the stage that your organization is in, whether or not the CEO, and I also want to remind folks when we say CEO, it may mean executive director as
Right.
well, depending on your organization. Uh,
Mhm.
but initially, I would say if we're talking about a CEO, and depending on the structure of your organization, then no, the CEO is not your primary fundraiser, but they are the one that has the ultimate accountability for the success of
Right.
fundraising within the organization. So, does
Mhm.
that mean they're the primary fundraiser? Maybe. It
Mhm.
really does depend on your organization, the resources, and really how you're structured. When I think about a CEO again needs to be involved, needs to understand what is
Mhm.
going on in terms of fundraising with their organization. But depending on the structure, a CEO also has to be responsible for operational needs and program delivery and
Yeah.
community engagement. So when I
Mhm.
think about all the things that rest on the shoulders of a CEO, if the structure is such that there are others to support fundraising, then they don't need to be actively involved on the day to day, but they are
Mhm.
ultimately accountable for the success of any fundraising that takes place, within the organization.
Yeah, I appreciate that you framed it that way because I don't think I would have necessarily gone there, but you are absolutely right. That CEO, for good or for bad, is responsible for all of these goals and things being met and things not being met, right? So you're right in that respect. Um, I think that it's an interesting thing that a lot of times, this is just my observation, but a lot of times higher level players want to meet with the decision maker, right? They kind of discount
Hmm.
the development people. And it's
Hmm.
like, I want to meet with the CEO versus the director of development. And I'm wondering kind of if you have a thought on that, because that's what I see.
Yeah, well, I think we have seen some of the realization of that, Julia, and how folks are kind of reimagining job titles also.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
where historically an organization may have, and again, I'm trying to be mindful of different sizes of organizations, but even a smaller organization that might have historically titled their fundraiser as a development assistant or even development director, they may title them now as chief development officer, so that
Right.
their title kind of resonates in a C-suite that
Yeah.
is a little more embraceable by the folks that we're talking about now that only want to talk to a CEO or an executive director.
Yeah.
Uh, but there is certainly some of that. And
Mhm.
and part of today's conversation, we'll talk about, when do CEOs need to get involved in the
Yeah.
process and in the engagement. So as fundraising professionals, as a development associate or development director, as we're starting to build a relationship with these potential donors or investors, we're going to understand through those
Mhm.
conversations
Yeah.
kind of their mindset and where
Mhm.
they sit in terms of who they need to engage with in order for them to make that commitment.
Right, right. Okay, so then we're talking about these relationships. We're
Mhm.
talking about the management of relationships. Should the CEO have a designated donor portfolio?
So again, I initially say no, but it it depends on. And I say no again. It
Okay.
doesn't mean I don't participate. Oh my God, don't talk to me about that. It really is um, kind of honoring and recognizing all of the things that fall on the shoulders or underneath the umbrella of the definition of a CEO for an organization.
Mhm.
So if you are privileged, and I say that with all intention,
Oh
if you
yeah.
are privileged to work for an organization where there is a structure where
Mhm.
you have the CEO and then a chief development officer and then development directors and development associates, all of those things, then I don't think it's necessary for the CEO to have their own portfolio of
Mhm.
donors, uh, to manage. I think at a CEO level, every donor is in your portfolio to
Mhm.
some degree.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good way to put it. That's a
and
very
that
good way to put it.
you really need to rely on your team to
Mhm.
help understand those donors or investors that need to be elevated
Mhm.
to the CEO portfolio,
Yeah,
if that's
level.
what we want to call it. But really, again, every donor is in your portfolio. But should
Mhm.
there be any that you specifically manage the relationship for? That really depends on your organization and your organizational structure. And I
Mhm.
trust CEOs in their roles to make that decision.
Interesting. So let me ask you about this, and this might seem like a little off the cuff, but it seems to me that there are a lot of development directors that navigate into CEO leadership because they know so much, are trained, and they're kind of like the next step. I've really been seeing that. I would say in the last 10
Mhm.
years, and I've been seeing that boards and other community members are like, yeah, if they've been a development director, they can jump into the CEO position. So let's say you've had, I know for good or for bad, but I don't know about you. I've been seeing that in my community.
Mhm.
So then you've got somebody who's been actively working and they have their portfolio and they have their relationships. How does the donor look at that when you're like, oh, now they're the CEO and we're going to have you managed by somebody else? Or do you not say that? Or how do you navigate that conversation in that stewardship?
Yeah, well, I think it's all part of good succession planning.
Okay.
I just think
Okay.
that we talk about it kind of loosely and not so loosely because it's been a topic of the nonprofit show, succession
Mhm.
planning, many different times. Um, I think and I hope that
Mhm.
if I'm a development director or a chief development officer, and I have a really great relationship with a donor, and I get elevated in my role, and now I'm serving as the CEO, one, that donor is going to celebrate that. They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
so happy for me as the individual and what that means for my career.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then they're going to feel great also that they now have this direct connection
Mm-hmm.
to the primary decision maker of the organization. And I still think you have the opportunity to, for lack of a better term, kind of hand off the administrative part of the relationship, the ongoing touch points, the communication. You can do that and do that
Mm-hmm.
effectively with the appropriate team member. But that donor is always going to know and remember that they have a relationship with you,
Yeah.
and now you're the leader of the organization.
Yeah, I like that perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way, Tony. And I think you're right. I think that's an awesome piece of this because you're right. You're looking at a relationship that hopefully has been forged over a long period of time, and then you have, um, you know, more opportunities in a different way. So I appreciate that. I think that's a good way to look at it.
No,
Let's
thanks.
talk about when, and you mentioned this in the kickoff. When should a CEO attend a donor ask? And should this be based on an amount or like what's the environment with which with how this is going to work?
Yeah, well, I've always been a fan and advocate of more than one person kind of representing the organization, particularly at the moment of the ask.
Okay.
So, whether that's a board member that's joining you as part of the
Mhm.
nurturing of the relationship and making the ask, whether it's someone that benefits from the great work that your organization is doing, or whether
Mhm.
it's the CEO. So, we need to trust our development professionals to know when is the right time to bring
Mhm.
someone in. And I guess my one of the things I think about with this particular question is if we're bringing the CEO into the conversation, uh, we need to do that before the ask because you don't want to bring someone into the ask that the donor hasn't already, in some way, shape, or form, been
Okay.
introduced to. Because it's like, why is this like, why did this other person just pop up on a Zoom screen, or why is this other
Okay.
person now ordering a latte and joining us at our table? You know,
Okay.
it's, I think that again, kind of thinking about the no surprises rule,
Mhm.
your potential donor or investor needs to understand that you're going to engage this individual and the reasons why you're engaging the CEO in this conversation. And then, should this be based on an amount? I would also say that we should be future focused when we are thinking about that. So it's really natural for us to say, oh, we have a potential $1 million donor right now. Like
Mhm.
this individual has $1 million right now to commit to our organization. I need to bring in the CEO. Well,
Mhm.
let's also think about in our planning, in our future focused kind of nature. Here's a donor through my research may have the potential for $1 million gift in 5, 6, 7 years. So why wouldn't I bring the CEO in now on this lower gift to build the credibility, to ensure this individual that they have the interest of senior leadership in a way to help kind of secure that pathway for a larger gift.
Mhm.
So again, if you're going to bring folks in based on dollar amount, don't bring them in just based on today, but bring them in based on the future.
So, Tony, that kind of makes me think that this is one of the things that you've taught me is the concept of stewardship, and that it's not just a one and done. That it's the cultivation is one piece, but it's the stewardship that's the bigger piece. And so it seems to me that that's really more how you're aligning this is that it's the ongoing relationship and the stewardship. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I think it's really fair to say, and and we joke a lot in the green room, right, about different award shows and everything, and most recently we were talking about the Academy Awards, and so when you think about those folks that have reached that level
Mhm,
in their career where they have earned that level of acclaim and stature,
mhm.
how hard it is to maintain that. Well, when you
Yes.
think about our donors as well, once
Yep.
we bring them on board and we get them to a certain level, how
Mhm,
hard it is to maintain that level.
mhm.
So again, this, being future focused, bringing senior leadership into some of those conversations at an earlier stage is going to
Hmm.
help us maintain those higher levels when we get there.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I also think too that, when you're talking about this and like the future thinking, um, I had a CEO tell me this years ago that when he was retiring, and I asked him, I said, what is the one thing you would have changed over the trajectory of your leadership? And he said, I would have asked for bigger, bolder,
Mm,
crazier things. And that, high net worth donors wanted to get behind big ideas and fund them.
mhm.
And so, it's kind of it kind of fits with this trajectory of stewardship, but leader to leader, a CEO can provide that. A leader, a CEO can say, yeah, we can explore this. We can, if this is your interest in funding something, maybe we can look at that. And where the development officer might not have that capacity. I mean,
Well,
it's a catch 22.
no, no, it really is. I mean, you bring up a good point though, because we often talk about, when we get to the point of the ask,
Mhm.
the worry of the under ask, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
and I think it's almost kind of like, do you ask for permission or do you ask for forgiveness? So
Mhm.
in most cases, at least in my experience, uh, it's been more successful most of the time to ask for more and negotiate down than to
Okay.
ask, so if you ask for, again, you have the opportunity to really go for it. And I
Mhm.
would encourage you to go for it and then negotiate backwards if you have to,
Yeah.
rather than take the risk of under asking.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I
I'm
think
glad
that
you mentioned it.
it's a fear. Well, it's a fear based thing. We're like, oh, because it sounds like a heck of a lot of money. What sounds like a heck of a lot of money to us might not be to that donor, right? We have to
Absolutely.
always, yeah, we always have to kind of temper that.
And donors, a lot of times donors love the entrepreneurial spirit
Yeah.
of a nonprofit. So make the big ask, have them
Mhm.
even stretch their goals for themselves
Mhm.
in terms of what their philanthropic commitments might be.
Okay, so along those lines, then, this is my next question to you,
Okay.
because in the entrepreneurial world, and especially in modern America, we are big into the bonus concept. We are big into giving bonuses, not
Pay for
just
performance.
yeah. I mean, so how do we look at that in the nonprofit sector?
Um, so So when I first saw this CEO's bonuses based on fundraising, my first reaction was hell no. Like, and forgive me, if that
Yeah,
offends anyone, but
yeah.
that was my first reaction because it
Mhm,
really, you know, if we're going to live in a space of transparency,
mhm,
donors are going to know whether or not CEOs are being compensated based on successful fundraising. And then it comes down
mhm,
to, so are our frontline fundraisers getting bonuses based on, because again, depending on the structure,
mhm,
the CEO may not be the one raising the money. So why should they be getting the bonus based on the
mhm,
performance of the fundraising team? So I have
mhm,
a lot of mixed emotions around anyone in nonprofit and in nonprofit leadership receiving bonuses based on fundraising.
mhm,
Now, That doesn't mean that I don't believe that people should be compensated appropriately for the talent that they bring to an organization, or that there may not be an opportunity for bonuses based on a more kind of holistic approach to the assessment of that leader's performance. So again, when I think of a CEO, it's more than fundraising. It's deliverables on our commitment to the community. How are we operating? How are we managing financials? How are we perceived in the community? So there's just an array of kind of checkpoints, for lack of a better term, that I would consider really important in the assessment of the performance of a CEO that would justify a bonus above and beyond the success of fundraising.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn with this because I feel like we are losing talent, to the for-profit world because of this is one of the things, and it's sometimes a little bit of a bonus, a little bit of money goes a long way.
Well,
And, I feel like, I don't know.
Well, what you said was really important to me right now, because when we think about bonuses, a bonus is meant to motivate,
Yeah,
right? And we're
yeah,
all motivated differently. So
yeah.
maybe a bonus doesn't mean necessarily dollars. Like a
Mhm.
bonus to me might be another week of paid vacation.
Yeah, huge. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Huge, right? A
huge.
bonus to me might be
Mm.
the organization underwriting my mental health, whatever that
Mhm,
is, or my physical health, right? Maybe you're
mhm,
underwriting my gym membership. Maybe
mhm,
that's my bonus, right? So I
mhm.
just think that um,
Yeah,
there are ways
that's
for us to get
interesting.
super creative around even the definition of bonus.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but to answer the specific question around bonuses based on the success of fundraising, I say hell no.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think it's fascinating that you would bring that up, with that, you know, you're that committed to it. But I agree with you. If we could look at what other opportunities there are, paid time off, expensing different things. And so many people now want to invest in their education. And do you have that? I mean, even just certification and things like CFRE, which these things are
Absolutely. What a great
expensive.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can allow that to be something that is included. I also think, Tony, that when you start looking at this bonus structure or reward structure, whatever you want to call it, it's got to factor in strongly to employee retention too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It was fascinating to me recently when I learned that so many development professionals, fundraising professionals, to your point, Julia, are leaving the sector. And they're
Mhm,
leaving the sector and moving into kind of wealth management and financial advisor roles,
mhm.
which do have tremendous bonus structures.
Yeah, yeah.
In this comparison. So I was a few months ago went to a local kind of planned giving council event, and I was not aware of the number of folks that had left nonprofit development, super successful folks in major gifts that left and are now in kind of wealth management, financial advisor roles, with for-profit organizations and
Yeah.
thriving.
Well, and it makes sense, right? I mean, that's a natural place to pick talent if you are in that wealth management, sphere to go after that talent. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm going to keep my eye out on that for that, Tony, because I think you're absolutely right. That's got to be something that is it's indicative of the training and the trust that we've built within this sector, and then to see it move off and be used by somebody else, that's somewhat frightening.
Well, even I mean, I'm transparent about this. I have, open to work on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And in the last month, I've been approached by 4 different financial investment firms to consider, connecting with them
Mhm.
around becoming a financial advisor or some, working in some type of wealth management role.
Yeah.
But I love that space too much. There's just no way I could do that. So,
Well, it's an interesting thing though, because I think, the CEO position, and major gift officers, they understand more how to work with people of means, with people that have that decision, not only the resources, but the decision factor that they can make those decisions and put them into play. Very interesting. I had never thought of it that way, but I think it's very telling. We are in the middle of the largest transference of wealth in the history of our nation right now, right
It's
here
true.
today. Now
Right.
it's going
Happening
on.
now.
And so it makes sense. What an interesting thing to go to circle around, I guess, right? Well, this has been a great conversation.
Thanks.
CEOs and how they have to lead and who they have to lead, and how they navigate their own journeys is a question of the ages, and it's fascinating. I also think too, when I talk to CEOs, Tony, they have so much pressure, as you mentioned, to meet those goals, and so they're like, well, I'm going to go out there and do it. I'm going to be the one that goes and asks, even if they have a big organization behind them in terms of development professionals. A lot of times they're compelled to do it.
Yeah, well, when I reflect on my experience as an executive director of an organization, again, ultimately my responsibility.
Yeah.
And so, if team members were doing everything that they could and you knew that and they still weren't able to meet goal, then you had to roll up your sleeves and pound the pavement and make it happen and embrace it and love it and do it. So yeah, it's fascinating. Like you said, the journey for folks, and but ultimately the CEO or executive director are responsible for making it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to believe that for some CEOs, or newer CEOs, that's a big shock. If they have not come from the trajectory of, their career path has not been through fundraising, that's probably a big shock to their system that they get involved in that.
Yeah, because a lot of times you'll see, I mean, you mentioned, that kind of pathway that we see a lot of chief development officers and really successful fundraisers are elevated to these CEO roles. So at least they have some of that skill set. But I also see a lot of folks that are in financial roles, CFO,
Yes.
because they're really good at kind of managing the dollars,
Yeah.
get elevated to a CEO role, and they don't necessarily have the relationship skills or the fundraising skills required to really succeed in that role, despite the fact that they're fantastic at managing the financials and kind of navigating the ins and outs of the cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why we put the word chaos in the title of today's show, because it's a tough thing. It's a big, big issue, and I could not have imagined anybody else to have this conversation with. If you have questions, send us your questions. You can reach out to us on all of our socials, or you can directly email info@americannonprofitacademy.com, and we'll put them together and we'll discuss them on air. You don't even have to identify yourself. We'll go ahead and do that. Who we like to identify are our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, I'm confusing you, Third Sector Company, and Your Part-Time Controller. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. Tony, we're coming up on our 1300th episode. 1300.
What?
Yep.
1300?
Yeah, and today is officially the 6th year mark. We are starting our 6th year of the show. So,
congratulations. I mean, just the value that you and the team bring, and the co-hosts and the guests to the nonprofit sector is just spectacular. I mean, you really can't put a price tag on the value. So thank you for the commitment that you've made.
No, it's a lot of fun. I couldn't do it without an amazing team. We tease our executive producer, Kevin Pace, all the time, but he really is the guy that puts it all together for us. You never get to see him, but he's here with us each and every day. And so
for sure,
we want to express our gratitude to to he and his team. Okay, everybody, have a great, wonderful, restful weekend because
And happy
Fundraiser
spring.
Friday. Happy spring. You look springy. I wish I wasn't wearing black, but yeah, we're in spring. And we will see you again as we have a full slate of guests next week. We leave you with this message, and that is to stay well so you can do well.